portion of the facade just in front of us. And on the ground floor, there are 4 arches that have been cleaned at the ground level. And if you look carefully above each one of them at the ground level, you can still see the original Roman numbers in Latin figures. You can see the L, that stands for 50. So starting from the first cleaned gate on the left, these were gates number LI 51, LII 52, 53, 54. Look at the way they wrote the number 4 in year 80. Still the old way with the 4 ones, I. At that time, every free Roman citizen received a sort of terracotta or bronze ID card. ID cards were as big as our modern credit cards. And on these ID cards, many informations were engraved. Things like the name of the person, place of birth, date of birth, and the social stand that used to correspond to a specific number of the gate. People knew they had to go through in order to reach their seats once inside this public building. There was at that time free admission, but people had to go through the right gate in order to end up in the right sector, because inside the public buildings the seats were divided according to the social stand. There were 76 gates at people's disposal, plus 4 extra gates used by the emperor, the senators, the alive gladiators who entered the arena of the Colosseum at the beginning of the games, and the dead gladiators brought out the Colosseum at the end of the game. So there was a total of 80 gates. It's not like this anymore. I want to prepare you to the current situation. There's 1 open gate today. especially if it's your first time in the Colosseum. When you look around, everything is quite hard to distinguish. And usually, once here, the first questions are where were the seats and where was the arena? Am I right? There are no original seats left. The only very few white marble steps that you see looking straight ahead.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
There are some white marble steps. They were rebuilt about 100 years ago, just to show us which way this place looked like. And it looked just like a stadium, in which there were seats from the height of those rebuilt steps, all the way up to the top and all the way around the arena. Remember that the original height of the Colosseum corresponds to the wall that you see on the left. That's the facade that we stood in front of, and that wall used to originally run all the way around the right half of the building before it collapsed. The capacity of the Colosseum must have been of about 75,000 spectators, and we know which way the seats were divided according to the social rank. So if you look from here to the left side of the arena, ground floor, can you see that big bronze cross? Just behind that cross, to its left, there are two pillars. Those two pillars used to support the private box of the emperor. So right there where the cross is, and I will tell you about the cross, it is not original, but right there where the cross is where the emperor sat. Then all the way around the rest of the arena, the ground floor, were the seats for senators, the most important people in the Roman society. And that is the sector, part of which was rebuilt through the white marble steps that I was pointing you straight ahead. The reconstruction of the steps is very helpful because they have not only rebuilt the steps, but also the slope, the surface supported by walls and arches. They used to go from the ground level all the way up to the top, and on these slopes there were the different types of seats according to the social stand of the people. So you see the reconstruction. They have rebuilt part of this slope. You have to imagine that even this corridor we are in, these two walls next to us, used to support part of this slope. So basically you are in a corridor that was at that time roofed, and the ceiling of this corridor was the floor for the upper level, just like in a modern stadium. Back to the seats. That reconstruction of the steps is very helpful, but in this case they weren't very precise, because we know for sure that the senators didn't sit on such simple marble steps. They sat on very comfortable wooden armchairs placed on wide terraces, and behind each one of the armchairs was engraved the name of the person who had to sit there. Now, just like today, all other sectors were located one above the other. Above the senators were the seats for knights. Remember that the Romans were mainly soldiers, so you can imagine the importance of the knights in the Roman society. Above them were the marble steps for members of rich Roman families, but remember, just men. Going towards the top were the very simple wooden steps for common people, still just men. And only at the very top, where you see up there on the left, those rectangular windows made of bricks, at that height were the standing places for women. So unless they were emperor's relatives or vestal virgins, women in the Colosseum had to stand at the very top level. We know that all spectators were shaded. There was a big awning spread at the top of the Colosseum at the beginning of the summer by a special squadron of sailors. Sailors because this awning was divided into many small triangular sectors, each one of them working through a different group of ropes. And that's why the sailors, they were so good with the ropes that they were able to open and close the awning according to the weather, even just parts of it, in case just some sectors of seats were hit by the sun. The arena, the platform on which the games took place, was just in front of you. In the center of the ground floor was the arena. Here where you see today that the arena got lost, the remains of lost. If you ever read about the arena of the Colosseum being flooded and used for ship battles, this was true, but only at the very beginning of the history of the Colosseum, only between year 80 and 95, when before the construction of the cellars, they still had a marble floor, and on this waterproof surface it was possible to flood the arena and use it for ship battles. But pretty soon they decided to build the cellars and to have, instead of a marble floor, a wooden floor that was covered by sand. The word sand in Latin sounded rena, and that's why it was called arena, because of the sand. This arena got lost, and now we see what the Romans could not see at that time, the cellars. And the cellars were very important for the games. Down in the cellars were the corridors in which people used to work during the games below the arena. There were the cages for the wild animals, the dressing rooms used by the gladiators to keep everything they needed for the games, their weapons, helmets, armors, some food. There were places where they could rest, and the most important thing kept in the cellars were the elevators, handy machineries of course, used to lift at the level of the arena what they needed during the games. Consider that they have found during the excavations in the cellars the remains of 28 lifts. On top of each one of them in the arena that covered the cellars was one trapdoor. They used to open the trapdoor, lift gladiators, animals, sometimes even trees, because during some games the arena looked like a jungle. Then they used to close the trapdoors and the games used to go on. So imagine, with 28 trapdoors, how surprising these games must have been, especially for the gladiators fighting, as they never knew what trapdoor was about to be opened, where the next enemy was about to arrive from, and also what it was. Two main kind of games took place in every Roman amphitheater. This is an amphitheater, an elliptical building. Gladiators against each other, and the gladiators against the wild animals. The gladiators were mainly prisoners of war or criminals. And these people in Rome at that time, unless they had already been sold at the servants' or slaves' market, had only two possibilities. They could go and work in the marble quarries, or be trained and fight as gladiators in one of the many Roman amphitheaters. The games people liked the best were the ones called munera, that consisted of fights either among animals. No, munera games consisted of fights among gladiators. This is the sun. Confuses me. Munera games, gladiators against each other. Any combination you can imagine. I mean, 1 against 10, 10 against 10, 20 against 10, any combination you can imagine. In these Munera games, think of the name Munera. This name has to do with the word remuneration. Because after a certain number of victories, the gladiators who were still alive, after a number of victories that was decided by each emperor according to his decisions, so number changed very often, they were paid, those who were still alive of course, and with this money they could buy their freedom. So imagine what a possibility it must have been for good fighters to earn their freedom and become free Roman citizens with all the rights of a Roman citizen. It's not true that the games were always to death. Gladiators were something expensive, so they didn't kill all of them every day. It's true that not many gladiators made it in becoming a free Roman citizen. The famous movie The Gladiator is based on the story of one of them who made it. And a gladiator called Maximus existed in the truth. The other games called the Venationes consisted of fights either among animals or between animals and the gladiators. Animals that were surely used in this arena were lions, tigers, elephants, bears, monkeys, hippos, antelopes, giraffes, horses, wolves, crocodiles. Remains of all these animals were found in the cellars of the Colosseum, and it's easy to imagine that one of the reasons why people liked so much to come to see the games was that there was no zoo at that time. So this was one of the only places people had to see all these exotic animals that we don't have in Italy. So imagine even how expensive such an organization must have been, just to move the animals from the Roman counties in Asia and Africa all the way to Rome by ship. Now remember what I was telling you about the ID card. People received an ID card. People did not have to buy it. The organization was very expensive. Remember, gladiators had to be paid, the sailors had to be paid, gladiators and animals had to be fed. So there must have been a good reason why the emperors spent all this money. And the good reason was that through a wide offer of games and shows given for free, the Roman emperors succeeded in keeping the people quiet. They knew what the Romans wanted: panem, food, and circenses, games and shows. And that's what people got just by showing their ID card at the entrance of any public building located within the borders of the Roman Empire. People could go in for free, enjoy the games and shows. They could receive free basic food on specific days and use the public steam baths whenever they wanted, the terme. So people were satisfied, there was nothing they could complain about, they were quiet, this was the emperor's goal. For this reason, here there were games very often, about 300 days a year. So almost daily for 400 years, from the date of the inauguration, year 80 AD, to the fall of the Roman Empire, 476 AD. After this date, everything changed in Rome. Rome was a city that had 1 million inhabitants when the Colosseum was built. After the fall of the Roman Empire, there were 700 years of invasions by the barbarians. In 700 years, the population of Rome went from 1 million to 30,000. So we're talking about a completely different situation. In 1300, for instance, when a man who saw the Colosseum wrote about it, and this description was luckily found, he describes the Colosseum 700 years ago, saying, "There's a round, barely visible building sticking out the dirt in the middle of the countryside. You can go to that place and take the bricks you need to build your house." So this description is very important. It gives us very important information. They had forgotten the name of this place. He says round building, simply. Then this was the outskirts of Rome, as the city had become so small. So this was outside the city, not the center anymore. And he mentions the bricks. This is a very important detail, because the bricks just behind you, they are original. They're here since 1900 years ago, but they were not visible. They at that time were covered by precious colored marble slabs. If he mentions bricks in 1300, it means that all decorations had already been removed at that time. And the bricks were really exposed and easy to take. The Colosseum went on for a long time, up to when, about 350 years ago, the popes, and that's why there's a cross next to the arena, they were the rulers of the city 350 years ago, assuming that the Colosseum had been one of the places used for Christian persecutions. They put the cross there, decided to stop the looting of the Colosseum, decided to keep what was still standing, and decided to transform this building into a memory of the Christians who had been persecuted during the Christian persecutions. They thought in here, in the truth, they never found so far any written document that confirms that Christian persecutions took place in this arena. So it might have been a mistake, or they have picked up the wrong building. We don't know. Anyway, thanks to this probably mistake, they started keeping the Colosseum and stopped spoiling it, and we still have today this 38% of the original structure of the Colosseum, which is a lot if you think of the age of this building. That's why even if it was a mistake, we don't care. It's a very welcome mistake. When they put the cross there, they saved at least this portion of the building. Let me tell you one last thing, how long it took to build the Colosseum. Only 8 years, between 72 and 80 after Christ. Don't forget that the Romans always used prisoners of war